You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashel and Edge.
Hello, America. Paul Harvey with the news.
Here on
Upstream with Cashel and Edge.
Mr. Harvey, thank you for joining us today to enlighten our show.
If I were the devil.
Yeah. That was a good rap.
That was a great piece.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a proto-conservative for all of us. And,
oh, sure, yeah.
You know, we had fake ones like our friend
William Buckley.
William F. Buckley.
Yeah.
Right out of the
CIA Groton School of Pied Piperism.
Yep.
Now,
but Paul Harvey, he was solid, baby.
Right, and he never went beyond. He had they call it the Overton window, the things you're allowed to talk about. He stayed within it, but he filled it up. He filled that space.
And it's interesting because our local media used to get things like Paul Harvey piped in,
right,
that were really quality, quick quality messages. And then the columns that were in the newspaper were things like Gorin on Bridge and
right.
Things like this that had little specialty niche things.
Or the jumbles.
The jumbles. But what it was really filled up with in our radio stations and our local newspapers, we had a lot of things that I don't think we've replaced.
You're absolutely right. And the result has been the virtual end of community.
It is, because now we don't get Paul Harvey and Gorin on Bridge. We get our whole news feed out of these monolithic national things, and really, it's just where has our local stuff gone? Where is it hiding?
No, it's a good question, because when I was a kid, and what we're talking here for us, Kansas City, but it could be any city in America.
Any city, yeah.
Even in small towns. Sometimes small towns are doing better than cities in this regard.
Absolutely.
But I was a paper boy.
Uh-huh.
I delivered both the Newark Star-Ledger and the Newark Evening News. I mean, I was a terrible paper boy. Sometimes I'd deliver the morning Star-Ledger in the afternoon. But I would get up and I would consume my whole product, and then you'd fight over various parts of it, especially on Sundays. I want the funnies. I get sports. I get the... And so...
These kids growing up today won't know the satisfaction of lying in bed on Sunday morning with all the sections piled up,
right,
and your hot coffee and your whatever, just going through the ads and the different the society page.
Yeah, and and when I moved to Kansas City, this is kind of sad in retrospect. We had two papers then, still one morning and the afternoon. I would read them from cover to cover because I didn't know the city at all. I didn't know the area,
right, and
I wanted to know what was playing in the movies and where the movies were. I wanted to know who was dying. I wanted to know who was society, who was where the crime was taking place and who was committing it. I wanted to know what upcoming events were, So you'd have a whole sense of shared information.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk to other people, they would all say, "Did you see what happened in to Councilman Hernandez or whatever?"
Right. There was so much more of that local connection to personalities that went away.
Yeah.
You and I talked about characters like Mike Murphy had a radio show filled with a lot of goofy stuff, but a lot of valuable information and a whole lot of people.
He had a 50 share.
Yeah, people. So everybody in Kansas City... Oh, did you hear Murphy interview Mayor Wheeler, or whatever that, I told you about that trick I did when we were being interviewed, and Mike Murphy interviewed Mayor Wheeler, and Mayor Wheeler was done, and then he said, "Now I got these two young men here," and it was a buddy of mine and I were on. And I continued like Mayor Wheeler. I said, "Mike Murphy, I think these guys are really... everything they say they need to do with the city, I think they should be given the red carpet." And Murphy's just sitting there like, "Oh, my God. What do I do with this?"
Now, for those who don't know what Mayor Wheeler Stanley just died like a year or so ago. He was like 130 years old. But he was, that's a brilliant invitation. And when I
Thank you.
first came here, he was very popular. They were talking of making Charles Wheeler, who's both a doctor and a lawyer, put him on a vice presidential ticket. He was a Democrat, but he was a sane Democrat.
Right.
And I heard him talk. I said, sounds like Truman Capote. You know?
Truman Capote's a little more like, Mr. Carson, everybody I knew when I was younger is either dead or in prison.
That's very good. It just on the spot too, I was
What else you got, Jack? No, let's.
well, I was watching the original movie In Cold Blood this weekend, which I was thinking about it, which was filmed on location everywhere,
Yeah.
and it's all filmed in Kansas City or in Kansas. They used the real home, the real Clutter family home, to shoot the movie.
Yeah.
And they launched their adventure out of Olathe, which people out of town can't pronounce.
Olav?
Olathe, It's like some sort of Swedish god or
Yeah.
something, No, but when it was especially useful when you come to a town, you can acclimate by learning the lay of the land through your local media. So you talked about Murphy,
And gossip columnists.
right? But Murphy had more than a 50 share.
Yeah.
And just to put that in perspective, when I was doing talk radio in the late 90s, that had all broken down or was breaking down. We had the leading AM share, and it was about 10. It was about 10% of the radio audience.
Yeah.
Murphy had more
And it
than
was
50.
very popular.
Right.
You guys were doing well.
And then on the NPR side, the PBS side, or whatever, NPR, local NPR station, the leading character was a guy like Mike Murphy, who was a local legend, who would have guests of all stripes on.
All
right?
stripes, yeah.
Including me. They don't talk to me anymore. They've, I used to be on the local PBS station. That's over.
Right.
It's nothing I've done. It's nothing I haven't changed.
And I think Nick Haynes is about the only lifeline tethering local issues to something that has any share that we all have in common. I mean, everything else is podcasts.
Right.
And the online presence of a TV station or the 12 people that still read the Star.
Can you do a Nick Haynes imitation?
Well, I did one time, and it kind of got me in trouble.
Yeah.
But we were doing these promos for. I was working with my buddy Robert Barrientos, and we were doing on-air promos for KCPT,
Right.
and they were pre-recordings of people like Nick and things like that. Well, I kind of snuck in there, and I said, "I'm Nick Haynes, and I hate my job." And they hit that promo, and it came on, and Nick gets on there. He's like, "No, I don't hate my job." I don't know whether it came.
Nick is from Wales.
Love that guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And but I had an experience. This is now we're in total into digression land. But my wife said, there's a guy I'd like to invite over for dinner. From UMKC. She's a professor, and she goes, "He looks just like Nick Haynes, and he's Irish." And Nick is kind of balding, kind of reddish hair,
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, why don't you invite him over, and I'll invite Nick over." So Nick comes with his wife, and he sees this guy who looks like his doppelganger, But and it worked
Man,
out.
those casuals are weird.
It worked out pretty well.
What a hobby. Invite people that look alike.
Right. In those days, and in every town, I mean, we're talking here about Kansas City, but I've lived in enough other cities where you could do that, where you'd have then the local media would pull the community together. And so you'd have a comprehensive view of everything that was going on in town.
Yeah.
I know, even when I went back, and I love to do this, my wife was from a small town upstate New York called Dunkirk. And, in fact, I have a summer home near that now on Lake Erie. And it was so cool. They had a daily newspaper for a town of 15,000 people. And I envied these people the immediacy of their lives, right? So they'd have box scores of the local softball games, right? You know, you can achieve fame, celebrity so easily,
Well, that's it. Local celebrity is gone.
right? So sometimes,
You got to be Kelsey and Taylor to
right,
be a local
right,
celebrity.
right. That's right in Kansas City now. It's so that we would they would announce my wife's return to town after like
Yeah.
a year at school or something.
Right.
Social events would all, and oddly, these local newspapers in many towns still function that way.
They do.
I don't know what the economic model is, but last summer when I got involved with this local library banned me from speaking
Yeah.
for presenting my book Untenable.
Back east, yeah.
Right, the true story of it became a cause. I became a celebrity, right? They were going back and forth in the columns, and everyone knew and everyone cared. It was really kind of fun. I enjoyed it because it was excellent for book sales, but and for just general self promotion. The book is called Untenable, by the way, the true story of white ethnic flight from America's cities. But that is the role that the media have historically played. You know who does it well, and I bet other cities have one, like Tony's Kansas City.
Oh, yeah. If it weren't for Tony's Kansas City, where would you even go to get a more unbiased, objective view on some local issue?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you're just crawling down rabbit holes otherwise. He's become the mainstream go-to.
He is, right. I mean, he is the...
Just because he maintains some objectivity.
Right, and also has input from, people comment. And there's debates back and forth, and it's interesting because he's Mexican-American, but he kind of leans right, but not in a way that would scare off the left. And he's open to, both sides, and there's debate, and there's local news. Everything I know about local news I get from a one-man operation.
That's it.
And I don't know that there's any. I talked to him about this once, about what's the financial model. I'm not sure there is one at the local level, which is unfortunate. But then again, the moment you have a backer or some sort of booster, you lose your independence financially. And I've been writing for a local magazine for 25 years. Bless their hearts, they managed to stay in business. And they do it by doing a lot of profiles of people, right?
And a lot of these magazines will actually get into the meet space, MEAT,
Yes.
where we all hang out and do meetings and cocktail receptions
right.
and events and things like that. And just becomes sort of an ancillary part of the deal, and then it gets more and more important.
Magazines like that are so dependent on their advertisers.
Absolutely.
And now advertisers are so easily offended. It's become very difficult to have opinions more dramatic than, say, like a missed third strike call at Royal Stadium. And how do we fix that problem? Is there a fix?
I don't know where the gap is. The gap will get filled somehow. There's this, we talk about the sort of AstroTurf downtown type scenario that cities have,
Right.
with the Boston Terrier, man bun,
Right.
nose ring, skinny jeans thing,
Right.
and all that. Those people in those towns don't have any connection to our perception of Kansas City.
Right.
They don't know any of that. They don't have a Hearn Christopher gossip column in the Star.
Right.
Or back when Joyce wrote more, Joyce Smith, who recently has departed from the Star, would have all the little business things going on. And then you had the Business Journal with all the little business deal. And then you had the Pitch and the New Times and the
Riverfront News
and all these things doing local restaurant reviews. And you had 3 or 4 restaurant critics that when I was back in the restaurant business, so I had to be aware of the guy at the Sun, the guy at the at the Pitch, the guy
Right.
at the New Times, the gal at the Star, all these things. Well, all that stuff fills that cultural, societal thing that is kind of fading away day by day.
And the net result of that is that, let's say you got together, you had a neighborhood party, like a dinner party or a block party. You could always talk to your neighbors about local news.
Yes,
And so you didn't have to venture into national politics.
right.
And there was always something to fill the space.
Yes,
And a good example in Kansas City was the ballpark vote, right? It pulled people together. It was a big enough issue that everyone sort of knew about it and could talk about it. So I could talk to some of my neighbors, some of my relatives, and we're on the same page or not. But even if we weren't on the same page, we weren't arguing about some horribly divisive issue.
that's right.
We could share information, what we knew, what they knew, there was enough sources pumping information, and we weren't getting it from the local newspaper. We didn't trust that. But beyond that, it makes for very difficult engagements with local people
Yes.
who are not your political allies.
It's an anti-subsidiarity move,
Yeah.
just like the 17th Amendment. Take every little issue, nationalize it, make it big, make it divisive, get everybody out of their community issues and solving issues at home and in the neighborhood. There's no Johnson County Sun, there's no Johnson County Herald, there's no Johnson County Squire. All that stuff is gone, and that was all filled with, some of it's being replaced by Nextdoor and
Right.
apps like that.
Yeah.
But you see, that's all amateur stuff. That's all like, this little cat,
Right.
he keeps coming. I keep feeding him, and he keeps coming back to my door.
Right.
What am I going to do about this? And it's like, they're stupid. When you feed a cat, they come back.
Or the next door stuff is fun. And we have like next door that's a national thing, right?
Yeah. It's like Craigslist. It's a national platform that
Right.
goes
And it's
local.
kind of controlled by the left, more or less.
Yes.
Not harshly, but so it's useful, but there is no arbitrating force behind it.
Exactly. Did somebody hear a loud noise last night? Yes, I did. I think it was gunshots. No, it must have been fireworks.
Right. So there's no voice that comes in and said, here's what happened on
Right.
39th and Bales last night. Now, when I first came to town, I trusted the newspaper.
Yeah, a lot of us made that mistake.
Well, it wasn't necessarily a mistake.
Well, and they had a whole bunch of people writing with dissimilar attitudes and opinions. I mean,
you could sort through them,
You could
and you don't
sort
always
through.
trust them, and they probably always had somewhat of a bias. I'm sure they did. But when I came to Kansas City, more than 90% of the people had the newspaper delivered to their home.
oh yeah. Some people had 2 or 3.
We had 2 every day. And what here's a metaphor for the way life was like then. That we would come to own a newspaper delivery route was a major enterprise. It was a franchise.
Yeah.
It cost a couple $100,000 to buy into it for you to have the rights to deliver the newspaper to a given neighborhood. And they would toss the newspaper up, and that varies from city to city. We used to deliver in the city, like Newark, we would hand walk them because there were a lot of apartments and steps and whatnot.
I can see you in your little +4s.
Yeah, I'm not
Newspaper.
not that long ago.
FDR had a stroke.
So I would slip the string off, right, and just forget about it, just leave it on the lawn, get my newspaper, and then the strings, I don't know, somehow magically disappeared. One day, a bird's nest falls out of the tree above my lawn, and it's made out of newspaper strings, right? So we were recycling.
So what are these birds doing now? That's what I want to
They're
know.
dying for a lack of strings. I don't know what they do, but they had. It was just such a natural part of life,
It was.
and the advantage was, too, is that, you could talk to your neighbor about X and he would know about X, or Y and he would know about Y. And we've lost that. People would die, you know about it, right? People were born, you know about it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really getting it. And people were engaged to get married.
Right.
And people, I remember, I mean, now there were issues where that was a very elitist thing for a long, long time.
Right.
But you have to look at who their readership was.
Yes.
I remember they didn't have people of color in the society page forever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, that opened up and became more diverse. Right before it kind of died and went away.
Yeah.
There wasn't, then it's like, okay, it's for everybody, now it's for nobody.
Yeah.
It had its little heyday.
And they had all the listings of who got married. And
all the engagements and marriages. I mean, not only marriages, engagements.
Right. So I have to tell a little story on myself. I'm not sure I should tell it on the air. I can't tell everything about it, but it involved...
Sure, it's another sex story.
No, it actually involved my marrying my wife for the second time. I had my reasons for it. I can't go into them, right?
Okay.
And at that time, things were localized. So we got married originally in New York State. I wanted to be married in Missouri. I had my reasons. And so, but I didn't want people to know that I was doing this.
Okay.
Because I had just gotten fired from the housing authority, or let go, and this big blow up. And I had enemies there in City Hall, and I just wanted to keep this under wraps. So I went to the most obscure marriage guy I could find. It was I think it was called the Melody Wedding Chapel in Raytown. And the guy I said to him, I want to keep this totally off the books, as under wraps as I can. He goes, well, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd go to Cass County to register. I said, I'm a step ahead of you. I already figured that out because all the Jackson County weddings would be listed in the Kansas City Star. Right. So I go to Cass County to register. And then I'm thinking, okay, this is a lowball wedding. I don't want any attention. I don't want this guy to remember this at all, So what happens is that, my wife gets dressed up, but I'm on the phone. I'm actually looking for a job, and I have a job thing going on. I can't get off the phone until a minute to go. I'm wearing a flannel shirt. We go to a wedding, right? She's wearing nicely dressed up. And her sister's there is all like the, witness. She's all nicely dressed. So already we're calling attention to ourselves. And we get there. I had not been there. I just talked to the guy on the phone. I thought he was pretty cool about it. It was as though we had walked into Liberace's living room, right? And I just wanted to okay, here you are, man and wife, get out of here. Okay, everything's cool. Give me $100. We'll call it a day. No, it was, I want to talk to you about holy love as you enter into this grand union, right? And
really?
And I just started laughing, right? And I'm thinking, don't call attention to yourself. Don't call attention to yourself. And I started laughing so hard, I had to leave. I had to go into the bathroom and close the door for like 10 minutes, And then when I came out, I had to think up some reason why I was laughing, that would justify this. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm nervous, right? And he goes, oh, that's okay. A lot of grooms start laughing when they're nervous. But anyhow, I kept it out of the local papers. I must say my enemies were not allowed to turn this against me. But you had that, I suppose there's a downside to having local news as well. You didn't want to end up in the paper doing something. Although this was entirely legal and legitimate and everything. But there was a larger reason for it I can't get into. But
a lot, a lot of the things, of course, we lost the want ads and all those things, and the things for sale and
right,
a lot of the retail advertising. But the thing that I'm not clear about is what's the lasting damage of losing the local celebrity, local event, local. It's just not there. It's not there anymore.
No, it's not.
I don't think.
It's not. And although I was back in...
the shared ones.
Yeah, there was the whole community, the communal nature of information.
Yeah.
It's not there. And without it, like I say, you fractionalize. You are factionalized. you have one side, our side, getting the news from reliable news sources, their side getting news from unreliable news
Yeah,
sources.
headlines and snippets
Right,
from
right.
Yahoo News and stuff.
And yet I was back in, where was I? Some small town recently. And I was amazed they had I know what it was. I wasn't there in that town. My in-laws were from Garnett, Kansas.
Yeah.
Which is a classic small county seat, about 80 miles from Kansas City. And I used to go there every year for Thanksgiving. We became, honorary members of the family. They were my sister-in-laws and in-laws, and they were really sweet people. In fact, I did the eulogy for the grandma's funeral. And Garnett was this perfect little town that, like all these little towns, has outlived its usefulness, but it hangs on in its spirit. And they had a newspaper article, and that they showed me, and they were like a weekly, daily newspaper coming out of this county. And they had an article about this woman, this Jay Sixer, who I knew well. I mean, because I profile her, right? I had her in town for a fundraiser. Because they picked it up off a national news feed and thought it would be local and useful locally, because she was a great-grandmother, right? They're from Colorado. So someone sent me the newspaper, I said. And then I'm looking through the newspaper, and I'm thinking, they do this every day? How could they do this every day? And Kansas City can't do this every day. But it has all the things you're talking about.
Yeah.
The bridge club scores, right?
Right.
The softball scores, the obituaries, some of the one ads, and in fact, they survive on those little ads, and for little ads, shopping center, discount bargain ads, whatever. And in a small town, that model still seems to work pretty well, much better than it does in a city like, say, Kansas City.
We had one guy here in Kansas City, I think everybody remembers, who I'm talking about. He died about, it seems like it's been about 8 years ago. Walt
Bodine.
And that was kind of one of the last connectors,
right,
that went through television and radio and print, and was around for, in that for 65 years or so.
Right.
But that's an example of the kind of local celebrity that everybody knew.
You would have community institutions that everyone knew. And even though he worked for the last, 40 years of his life on the local PBS station, the local NPR station,
Yeah.
KCUR, he represented what NPR used to be.
Yeah, he did.
That is a communal meeting place for people who have different
just like
ilks.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Haddix.
Right.
He's still doing his locally produced record show,
right,
with records,
right,
that he play, and he's connected to the Mars Sound Archive and to UMKC and to that whole arts group that was from his neighborhood over there by UMKC. I mean, Chuck and Walt both were, but they had a lot more than just those two.
Right, and Walt was such an institution that, he was, after, you're doing radio, and he went blind, pretty much.
Right. He had...
although I'd still see him at the movie theaters, trying to, he wasn't totally blind, but close to it. So he'd have help doing his blind thing.
Yeah.
And then he kind of went deaf, right? And he was still doing his radio show.
It was amazing. Yeah.
And I would be on his show about once a year for something or another. I mean, he served the function like Tony's Kansas City does now.
Yeah.
If you're in the news.
That's right.
They'd have you on. And he was always very congenial. I doubt if he ever voted Republican, but you didn't get the sense, right?
Right.
And then when he left, I was no persona non grata, on the...
And Shannon, he's gone now, and Shannon was another one of those local guys that had been around forever.
Right, and so you used to have institutional figures who knew, what they had? They had a cultural history of the place. They represented a legacy, a voice from the past, who knew how things were 80 years ago or 60 years ago or whatever, and they could share that. So you had perspective on the events of the day. Oh, we had a flood. You should remember the flood in 1951. That was a flood, and then you'd have genuine stories of. So you could put things in perspective. The sky wasn't falling every day. You had people there who could tell you, no, the sky had fallen 38 years ago, exactly the way it fell today. It's not, this is nothing new. So, and now when you have local news people, there are exceptions, but many of them are transitory. I mean, they're in and out in a year or two, I mean, some of them actually in the local stations, some of the guys have been around for quite a while and they stuck it out. Partly because they were white guys and they knew they couldn't get hired anyplace else.
Yeah, I have trouble even thinking of local guys that are still active that fill that category. I mean, our iconic weathermen, and we've had many of those,
right,
who were real connected to the town. And
who was the one guy who was very gay, very out gay?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Well, I'm not going to out anybody.
No. He was. I'm not outing him. He was out. And he was like one of the. He was so well beloved.
Oh, Gary.
What's that? Gary. We'll just call him Gary. That he could survive. He survived being openly gay. Right. He was such a benign local figure that everyone knew
he survived cancer too.
Yeah, he survived cancer. He had little dogs that he brought on the air.
Great guy.
And he didn't shoot the dogs when he brought them on the air.
No. And he lived for the weather, man.
Yeah.
That guy lives for the weather.
Right. And then he, what his fatal error was?
What?
Doubting climate change.
Yeah, just like Mike Thompson.
Yeah.
He's a doubter. Did you know that?
Well, he became a Republican politician.
He became a Republican politician, but he came out way before then calling BS on all that crap.
And Lezak was essentially canned for that.
Yeah, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, he was awfully good and had a big following.
He did. He had a huge following, and he was a public institution.
Absolutely.
And no one hated him,
no.
Right? And he, pulled the community together like these people did, and now he's gone.
Of course, Broski's an all-time.
And the thing is, though, if you go to any town, they've all gone through the same devolution.
Yeah.
Every city in America has gone through the same devolution, and not one of them seems to have figured out that there's a way to avoid it, right? And the way to avoid it is for your local PBS station, your local NPR station, your local newspaper to open themselves up to the community.
Exactly.
Now, there are forces...
Unwake.
Right. There are forces afoot that are going to narrow your audience a little bit because you're competing with, electronic forces that didn't exist 50 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But they've hastened their demise in every case.
And there was no reason to do that.
No reason. For years, I told people who worked at the newspaper, said, you guys have an interesting model.
Yeah.
The only people who still read your paper are old white people.
Yeah.
And all you do is tell them how much they suck.
Right.
I go, I don't see how this model is going to work out in the long run.
I had an interesting conversation. I had it a couple times when we'd get a new editor at Kansas City Star.
Right.
It used to be if you were an editor at Kansas City Star, that was pretty cool. Yeah,
pretty cool. Again, that was something everybody knew who that was.
Right.
Oh, it's Art Brisbane.
Yeah, right. In fact, I once had before I get to because two encounters with Brisbane, who I knew pretty well. He lived in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And one day I'm walking down the street. I may have told you the story. I'm out for a walk. It's in the middle of winter. There's not many people out. He's out walking his dog. We stop. We talk. And we're just BSing about this and that, the other thing. And I'm wearing a hat that says U.S. Park Police.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a wonderful visual image to understand what happened to the media. And he said, what's with the U.S. Park Police hat? And I said, well, it's my Vince Foster Memorial hat. In fact, a friend of mine sent it to me for that reason, right? Vince Foster was the Hillary lover who ends up dead in Fort Marcy Park, a place that all patriotic Americans should visit at least once. I've been there twice. And he said, I saw it's my, Vince Foster Memorial.
And I know what he said.
He said, are you one of those people who think that he was murdered? I said, Art, I've read about this more than anyone. I know the story well as anyone does. I'm just going to tell you this. He didn't die where they found him. And his response, I've told you that.
Yeah.
I don't want
I
to
don't
hear
wanna
it.
hear it.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
I don't want to hear it.
And he, with his hands over his ears, he walks away. And that's what happened. They didn't want to hear contrary information.
Exactly.
So I had met with Art, at least on one occasion, I think, after he became publisher or editor or whatever. Excuse me. All right. You talk for a minute. Let me take a drink of water.
Well, let me pick up that. And then I talked to him.
Now I'm going to choke him up here. And so I had lunch with him or whatever, breakfast. I had a map right after the election. And I showed him all the counties. They were doing the red and blue counties then, right?
Yeah.
And I said, here's our metropolitan area. Here's 50 counties, right? 47 of them are red. Why are we producing a blue paper, right? What's the logic in this? Where's the market plan here? Why are we doing this? And I met with him. I met with two other editors. Did the same thing. Same, dog and pony show. Thinking that maybe I'd get to them.
They even fooled themselves. You remember they brought in a mutual friend of ours that they thought might add some diversity
Yeah, right.
to the editorial page.
And then buried him.
He lasted about 3 minutes, and they kicked him hard, and he wound up on his feet. Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness, because that's hard.
Because
You're a
at that
55-year-old
age,
white guy, and you're in the media business.
Yeah.
You better start something on your own.
But they really but they thought they were being great and gracious and open-minded and all that stuff by bringing some poor guy in and kicking his butt, getting him out of there. But no, they just, it's their way is the right way, and their message is the right message, and everything else is just wrong, and you're all stupid.
And what happened, they did about 15 years ago, and I think if we had a communal source of information, we'd be still talking about this. The New York Times sent the heir apparent to Kansas City as the Midwest reporter, Sulzberger.
Little Skippy or whatever his
Punch
name
or
is.
Pinch.
Pinch Salzburger.
So he comes to town, and I invited him to breakfast. I had breakfast with him. Because at that time, I wanted to talk about TWA Flight 800 very specifically. So I had a chance an hour long to lay this whole out, and the New York Times roll on this. You guys, it's in your backyard. Plane crashes on Long Island, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. He's not saying that specifically, but I'm getting that message, right? So I write a column about it, right, in Ingram's, my local business magazine that I write for. And and I guess he read it, because he shows up later at a dinner party that I'm invited to. I didn't get invited to many dinner parties, but it was by another mutual friend of ours who was in a position to invite Sulzberger and to get it answered. There's only 7 of us there. And he goes, I read your column. So I said, oh, good. I said, you like it? Because I totally made fun of him, just like this prodigal son that gets sent off to the hinterland to learn something about something, Now he's back. He's like the publisher of the whole New York Times, right? So I cannot say that I have an in at the New York Times. But he knows who I am, so I maybe forgot. But
Well, you don't want an in there anyway.
No, but now it's, the only way in a local town you can make the news and have everyone talk about you is to win the Super Bowl. We've done that twice, and now people are already tired 3 times. In other cities, I don't know what the common bond is, what pulls them together.
Sports is the only thing they got.
Yeah.
The high school sports,
Right. And small towns, that works a lot. That still works.
Mm-hmm.
The Friday night lights kind of thing, where it pulls the people together. They all get together. And so in small towns, the sense of community is just much stronger. And it maintains itself through their local media. But the big cities don't want to change. And I think it's almost too late.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how the Kansas City Star or some other entity would have to come in and they would have to create a new model, almost create it from scratch.
Maybe that's part of what emerges in your new dystopian novel.
Oh, and my novel is hopeful. The one I talked about last week, The Skeleton Crew, the post-COVID die-off
Maybe they
world.
could be running a local newspaper.
Yeah, they would. I mean, that would be a natural kind
They
of
could
phenomenon, right?
print it on a mimeograph or something.
Did you ever have one of those little printing sets as a kid?
No, but I ran the one at school. And they had to make me quit because I loved the smell
No,
of the
I was going to
ink
say
too
you
much.
were getting high on the ink. No, I had, a newspaper is just a part of my life growing up because I delivered them and they came to my house. But I thought every kid had his own little printing press that should, try to print local news and, do some stuff and alienate people. And
Yeah, we did them in school. We did our own newspapers. We did quite a few of them, actually. We just get in trouble with them, though.
yeah, my tendency to move to satire was just too quick. So
Yeah.
I did
Also worked on the Harbinger.
and that was,
That was the Shawnee Mission East paper.
and they survived. Were you fired? Were you?
No, I was moved around a little, though.
Yeah, I can imagine. I did when I worked in Kansas City, and when I first got here, I needed a job. I went to work for the Housing Authority, and I had time on my hands, so I volunteered to do a Housing Authority newsletter, right? And which people read. It had a communal effect, and I'd do it just like what you were talking about, gossipy stuff and news stuff, and who's hired, who's fired, et cetera. And then I decided to do a news story. I said, I wonder if I can get away with this just for the heck of it. So the big housing project in town then. Every major city had an ugly high-rise that was bound for destruction. And ours was called Wayne Minor. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Stately Wayne Minor.
like the Bruce Wayne.
That's what we
Wayne
called
Manor.
it. We called it Stately Wayne Minor.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get through the stories. It's so stupid. But so I wrote about,
Oh, boy.
I have a cold, and it manifests itself. And when I start laughing, I can't control myself.
That's right.
But I wrote about Wayne Major, the great big development that existed before Wayne Minor, right? And it was 50 stories high, And no one got it. No one said, "Oh boy," no one said to me, "Jack, what are you doing?" They said, "There was a Wayne Major here before a Wayne Minor, right?"
Now you know what a great example of public housing that was.
And it was, by the way, it was MINER, wasn't MINOR.
Because they had balconies all around.
Right, that was great for kids. Yeah,
And they had to quickly
fence them in.
fence it all in
Right.
like a prison because
Yeah.
people were throwing each other off of the balconies
right.
or jumping on.
Right. And I went. I worked there for 4 years, so I'd walk those halls. I know the public housing well. Grew up in it, went back to Newark, worked in public housing. And so when they were going to demolish Wayne Minor, Wayne Major had long since been demolished, and the mythical Wayne Major. I took my little girls down to watch it. They were roughly at the time 2 and 8, right, or 7, right? So I had them for the afternoon. I thought we'd go for a ride and go watch Wayne Minor. I thought it'd be kind of cool, So I know those neighborhoods well because I worked there and I had some zigzagging between neighborhoods. I stopped at a stop sign, and there's 2 hookers standing on the street corner. And one of them is like about a 300-pounder. And she looks over at my car and my kid. She goes, "Take those babies home and come on back," right? Just like that, right? And I said, "Mighty tempting offer." And she said, "Stick it up your nose." I said, "Well," and then my daughter said, "Dad, what's that about?" No, don't worry about it, kids.
That could have been a life-changing event for you.
It could have. It may have been for my daughters, But I was not tempted. And so we went down, but we watched it, They got to see that, a little experience, a little history. And they became part of the lore, the cultural memory of a given area, right?
By the way, the people who resided in Wayne Minor,
Yeah,
they read the same newspaper you did.
that's exactly right.
How many websites do you think you guys have in common?
How about 0?
0.
Right.
And that's the point, is it's also the diversity huggers, the people that want diversity and all that. Guess what? We're going the other way.
Going the wrong direction. And, it's odd because it's, and then you have people like the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, saying that the poor black kids in the Bronx don't know what a computer is.
Oh, yeah, I heard that one.
So Terrence Williams, I don't know if you know him. He's a sort of a right-wing black provocateur, funny guy. He makes this video of himself with a laptop. It was like Planet of the Apes.
Jumping around like a champ.
Right.
Yeah.
Humor is the best way to
Oh, yeah.
to get at these people. Unfortunately, they don't have a sense of it, but sometimes you know when you're being had, But no, it's I think we had one example in town in Kansas City where an entrepreneur tried to start an alternative newspaper. Steve Rose, remember?
Yes, I do.
It was a
tabloid. Daily.
And it was a bad idea. Everything
was a bad idea.
Misconceived.
The timing bad.
Yeah, and we have newsboys
wrong
on street
guy.
corners. And everything was wrong about it. But we haven't.
And it was a rip and read, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
So by that I mean it was just feed off of the AP.
Right, right.
With a little dash of Skeleton Crew stuff thrown together.
Speaking of Skeleton Crew, the name of my forthcoming novel, if I ever get around to it, it is a sequel to The Hunt, of course.
Oh, that's right.
Every young man should read. Available in paperback everywhere. But no, it's your point is well made. And I would ask you to think about gathering together a group of investors and starting over. Starting the plus you have a good name for it, Edge,
Yeah.
Edge of the city.
Do you like Steve Rose did? Or
not that model. It's a stupid model. Yeah. Although I like tabloids. And the New York Post is one paper I'll pick up and read whenever I'm in New York.
Well, Dick Wilson and I are really trying to address this.
Yeah.
We're putting together a podcast.
Uh-huh.
We've done it before. We had one before COVID, but we dropped it.
I was a guest on it one time.
That's right, you were.
Yeah.
And so it's Dick and Lois KC, I think we're going to call it.
Okay.
We're pulling people together right now, and what we're doing is we're just getting other people's content. We've got some real interesting local characters.
You ought to pull Tony in.
Well, I approached him. I haven't heard back.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think he knows me, so
Yeah.
I might use somebody like you to surreptitiously go in there.
Yeah, sure.
But to pull in those websites, there's these great websites. I grew up in Overland Park. I grew up in Kansas City, Municipal Stadium, and basically just have a place where people who maybe aren't from here can get a little taste of the people and the history and know what it's like to be a part of that.
Right.
Because there's no real big source for that. So it's kind of a big show.
No, it's a good idea.
once a month thing.
Right.
And we'll have snippets of it out in the media constantly, but we'll bring people in live to intro segments, but we'll have old footage from, for example, I've got a lot of stuff from my dad from the press club of the 1960s with dancing girls and horn-rimmed glasses and cigarettes. And it's like, this was downtown Kansas City.
Right.
This was what it was like in the Chow Lounge where everybody hung out. And all these other places and the gay bars and the, whatever they call the ones where they transvestite bars and just the whole, we had so much stuff going on. And then to get man on the street stuff.
And that used to be part of local.
Rich Linden's hilarious.
Local newspapers also. The man on the street was a common feature.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's both funny to see how little people know. You interview people in the plaza, and did you know there's a baseball team before the Kansas City Royals here in Kansas City?
Did you know there's a housing project before Wayne Minor called Wayne Major? Lots of possibilities. Hey, we try to do that here. We try to bring the world together.
That's right.
Here at Real Media.
For the serious-minded.
I would say Real Media is where we are in Overland Park, a great place to, if you have an idea for reaching out and reaching people in some sort of medium, either audio, video, or both, this is it here. And we do it. They host us. They're brave people to do that.
Brave to have us. We love it here.
But and we'll see you next week on Upstream
With Cashel and Edge. Good day.